We will be recording this and it'll be available on SFCC's YouTube page following the recording probably later this week. So welcome everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Valerie Nye. I'm the library director here at Santa Fe Community College. I want to thank you all for coming today. I just want to take a moment to introduce you to Dawn if you don't know her. Presenting this afternoon is Dawn Wink. Dawn is director of the Department of Education here at Santa Fe Community College. And just on a personal note, I wanted to share that I first met Dawn when we were both working at the College of Santa Fe. And when I first met Dawn, she was teaching a class called Reclaiming the Divine Feminine, which I just loved the name of the class. But since meeting Dawn and knowing that she has been a teacher of the Divine Feminine, I've always thought of her as a special person with special skills, powers, and insights. And I'm really grateful that our paths have crossed again here at Santa Fe Community College. And I'm looking forward to learning about your most recent research and looking at our language and landscape. So I know we all have a lot to learn today from you, and we're looking forward to that. So I'll turn it over to you, Dawn.
Oh, thank you so much, Emily. And that, welcome to all. That was, I've loved pretty much everything I've taught, but that Reclaiming the Divine Feminine, I loved teaching that class. It was just a phenomenally special class. And I will dive in. I see Linda has a hand raised. Do you have a question? I'm wondering if there's connectivity. Linda? Well, go ahead and pop it in the chat or hop on when you can. Welcome to all. It's wonderful to see familiar faces and new faces. And thank you so much for taking this time to share this afternoon. What I would love is just pop in the chat what it was about this topic or these ideas that drew you to us gathering here together. Just a word, I'm just curious what it is that really that drew you here. We can just pop it in the chat, popcorn style. Hi, Lenny, welcome. Wildness, love wildness. We're going to dive deep. Beauty of intersection, words about landscape, languages. And Amna, your life is such a beautiful intersection of languages. Hey, Lenny, yay. Connectivity, Tatiana, yay. Well, thank you. Yeah, and you, mwah. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. And what we're going to do is I have some ideas to share. And then at the end, we'll have time to gather for questions and conversation. When I'm sharing my screen, maybe there are people who can see the chat while they share their screen, but I'm not one of them. And so if it takes me a little while to loop back around, please forgive me. But let's go ahead and dive in. Let's see. And let's see here from the beginning. There we go. So this, our time now, we're really going to look at focusing on stories at the intersection of language and linguistic literatures through wildness, beauty, and imagination. And as we dive in, I know all of our lives are rich and full. And so how I like to begin our time is in honor of a couple of my great mentors. And one is the Chilean writer, Isabel Allende. And whenever she sits to write, she always lights a candle to invite the spirits. And so I would like to do that, big spirits, as we gather together. And Terry Tempest Williams, for those of you who are familiar with her work, when she writes, she has a glass or a bowl of water on her desk, And here you can see there's the water. To remind her that transformation is occurring even when it's not visible. And so just as this water is evaporating, transformation is occurring even when we're not aware of it. So now that Isabel and Terry Tempest Williams have joined us, I invite each of you to, and myself, to take a deep breath and get grounded, and hopefully this little sliver of time that we get to spend together to stay present in these ideas. I know so many of us are pulled in so many directions, and I'm so grateful to share this time with you and these ideas. So how did this journey begin? Like so many of us, I live a life of different worlds, and these worlds that have lived kind of in parallel until this latest journey that we're going to dive into. I'm a ranch kid. I grew up on a ranch in the middle of nowhere in southeastern Arizona, the San Pedro River Valley, the Holy Land, no phones, very extraordinarily remote. It was a childhood of braids and books and riding horseback. So that's, and my family still ranches. So that's very much something that I bring to my lived experiences. My background, my academic background is multilingual education and linguistic human rights. And because she's with us, I have to share Tatiana Klein with her fantastic book on bilingual ed that I'm savoring. And we're going to talk about translanguaging. And so I wanted to highlight Tatiana's work. And so I bring 25 or 30 years of multilingual education, working in a variety of contexts, always through the lens of languages. I was working with 75 teachers from throughout Mexico, and we had gathered in Puebla, and we're looking at interactive and engaged pedagogy with language acquisition. I also am a mom, and here are my three when they were babies. This guy is now 26, and we have the birthday gauntlet in the Wink family. This guy's 26, Wyatt is 26, Luke just turned 24, and Wynn Elizabeth on her first day home is now 23. So when one thing we'll be talking a lot about is transdisciplinarity, and that idea of it's not of not living life in a compartmentalized way. Regarding academics, it means a single discipline. I apply it, and I saw it at a doctoral program that was a very transdisciplinary program, and because I live a transdisciplinary life like so many of us. I'm also a creative writer, very much both fiction and nonfiction, very much place-based writing. The landscape nourishes me. I find it fascinating, nourishing. So many of those writers would be, for example, of course, Terry Tempest Williams, Craig Childs, Amy Irvine, Ellen Malloy. I could go on and on. How this journey began is I noticed that, before we jump over there. Okay, so living this life, I noticed years ago that what we know in multilingual education, in ecolinguistics, in linguistic human rights, is the intimate connection between language and the heart, and the rate that languages are being extinguished around the globe. The United States has the very shameful honor of extinguishing languages more effectively than any other country on earth. And all that is lost with that. And so linguistic human rights really refers to the right to speak one's mother tongue anywhere, anytime, in any venue. And we know that at the rate we're going right now, if we continue to lose languages at the rate we're going, 90% of the world's languages will be extinct, will have disappeared from the planet for forever within the next 100 years. And what I noticed is that while we within academia, we're steeped in these ideas, and there's a huge following of these ideas. As I was reading in landscape literature and talking about sustainability, talking about climate change, talking about all of the, it seemed to me that language, with a few rare exceptions, Robin Wall Kimmerer, is not present in that conversation. And years ago, I decided I want to bring language's element of landscape into a broader audience. And so I sought out it took me a long time to find a doctoral program that I wanted, because I knew at this stage of life, I knew what I wanted, I knew I knew what I didn't want, and what I wanted, something that I could bring my whole self, all of these different lived experiences into my inquiry, and something that I was passionate about. I wasn't interested in going for a PhD, just to have a PhD. I wanted to immerse myself in these ideas that I'm passionate about. And so for those of you who transdisciplinarity is new, this is I love this quote: "An unprecedented global linguistic and environmental crises," my pictures are in front of that require us to move beyond discipline-specific and isolated analyses and into richer and deeper perspective, as only a thoroughly transdisciplinarity perspective can navigate such issues, which are at once technological, cultural, ethical, political, economic, ecological, I'll add linguistic, cultural. And this is another thing that I love. True disciplinarity is demanding. It requires creativity. And this idea of blending the academic with the creative is something that I was passionate about. And so this is the way that I did it that led to these stories that we're going to be exploring. So here's kind of a representation of my academic life and my academic world: multilingual ed, second language acquisition, linguistic human rights, ecolinguistics, the connection between language and landscape, language loss. And as all of us know, what is written in those in general, that is a very academic voice that's written in these ideas. And while we inhale it and absorb it, and I currently have tomes behind me written in this voice, it's unapproachable for people outside the field often. And then within landscape literature in general focuses on connection to place, beauty in the land, a personal relationship with the land, ecological loss, so geographical loss of species, loss of plants, loss of animals, and it's written in a creative narrative voice. So whereas this is the academic voice, this is the creative narrative voice. And then I also come from a background of regenerative agriculture. And what that is essentially the idea of honoring and replicating the historic migratory patterns of animals that are ended when fences are put up. And it is replicating those migratory patterns to break up the soil and with hooves. And that way that allows moisture and seeds to be planted and flourish. Anyway, so much to say about that. A key element with all of these, diversity. A key element with all of these different lived experiences is the necessity of diversity for thriving. Okay, so what I hope to do with these stories is I hope to integrate language as an intrinsic element of landscape. And this is where I haven't seen this done. Through the lenses of wildness, beauty, and imagination. There's loads out there about beauty. John O'Donohue, gorgeous beauty and imagination and wildness. But I at least have not seen these lenses applied to specifically language and that relationship between language and landscape. And I knew, years ago, I thought, this is what I want to do. I just didn't know where I was going to be able to do it. And I waited until my kids were grown. And so we could, anyway, so there were 4 of us in college at the same time. Now, as we're looking at these ideas, this is the question that I approach these stories with. And what I hope is, because I know so many of you are wrestling and navigating and wading through the waters of your own creative and or scholarly and or creative scholarly journeys right now. I'm hoping that these questions and what I did with them may be helpful and applicable to you in your own discipline, in your own field, in your own journey. So what I thought was, okay, we know we're losing all these languages. We know the heartbreaking consequences of losing one's mother tongue. How can exploring stories, and we're going to dive into story, at the intersection of language and landscape, specifically through wildness, beauty, and imagination, how can they contribute to ecolinguistic global justice? Because while I did ground the stories that I wrote in the Southwest and in the Great Plains, this is really, languages are being lost around the world right now. And then even more specifically, because oftentimes when we talk about this, it's in such scientific terms. How can bringing the lenses of wildness, beauty, and imagination in hopefully enrich all of our understandings and perspectives? So as we dive in, I wanted to ground us in, when I'm using, there's going to be some keywords that I'm using, and these are there are many different understandings and perspectives. These are this is the understanding that I'm bringing to these words. Beauty. I'm the biggest believer in beauty. And when I am talking about beauty, and my experience and the way of walking through the world with beauty is a deep and holistic philosophical framework as understood through an indigenous worldview, beautifully expressed in Dene by the word hosho. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, but it means to live in peace, balance, beauty, and harmony. So when I say beauty, I think in the Western paradigm, we tend to think aesthetics. And yes, and what I'm really talking about is the idea of harmony, peace, balance. Ecolinguistics. And again, this is it. We're going to be talking about this a lot. It's the connection at its heart. It's the connection between language and landscape. It's the connection between ecology and languages. And there is a huge connection. It's interesting. There was a study done recently that looked at by Tove Skutnam-Kangas, who Tatiana and Stephen definitely know. They looked at the correlation between language thriving, and they looked specifically at birds and butterflies, or the loss of language, and how those species were doing. There's a 74% correlation between language and species diversity with the butterflies and birds. That reflects that correlation. So another way to look at this explores the role of language in the life-sustaining interactions of humans, other species, and the physical environment. Imagination. Everything begins in our imagination. I mean, that's where ideas begin. And so I love this by Gary Lachman. The imagination presents us with the possible potential realities that it is our job to actualize. It also, and I love, it presents us with a world that would not be complete without our help. And so that idea of us as active participants, as co-creators with our world and with the world that we hope to bring into being or to sustain. Wildness, I love that word too. Okay, wildness. And there are so many, this is a Rick Bass quote that I think it's at the heart of what I understand to be wild. If it's wild to your own heart, protect it. preserve it, love it, and fight for it and dedicate yourself to it. If it's what makes your heart sing, if it's what makes your days soar like a hawk in the summertime, then focus on it, because for sure it's wild. And if it's wild, it'll mean you're still free, no matter where you are. And so I think about what do we feel so passionately about, to want to love it, to preserve it, to fight for it, and to dedicate ourselves to it. And I love this, our beloved Terry Tempest Williams. We recognize wildness as creativity, to be whole, to be complete. Wildness reminds us what it is to be human, to be connected to rather than what we are separate from. And I understand wildness, it encompasses the whole of language. Not just the sounds, not just the phonemes, but our whole human experience of language as love, as power, as connection, as reflection of our landscape. Linguistic human rights, in its essence, and again, our beloved Tobe Skunabkangas, the right to speak a language, any language, your mother tongue language, anywhere in any venue. There is a massive legal body that is working at the global level through UNESCO on these issues. Tobe Skunabkangas, Richard Phillipson are two of the primary leaders, to my mentors and dear friends. Linguistic human rights can be defined as only those language rights which are so basic for a dignified life that everybody has them because of being human. Therefore, in principle, no state or individual is allowed to violate them. So the next time this did happen, to standing in the grocery line and you hear somebody say, "This is America, speak English." No, 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 no. This is a basic human right. Our beloved Lucy Tapahonzo. I was very honored. She sat on my dissertation committee. And we were at a New Mexico writers dinner together, and she was speaking. She gave the keynote, and she said this about her mother tongue, the Dene language, that I think so beautifully conveys the essence of language. Saad is the Dene word for language, which was given to us by the Holy One. Saad contains the wisdom of stories, history, songs, prayers, and teachings that were meant to guide us into the future. It is adaptable and relevant to our changing lifestyles. The Holy Ones knew we would be blessed and sometimes threatened. Saad is also portable because it lies in our way of life, our approach to challenges, and in our attitudes about the land, water, animals, plants, and environments. I love this quote, and I just had to share it. Earl Shores: of all the arts and sciences made by man, none equals a language. In its living entirety can describe a unique and irreplaceable world. I saw this once in the forest in southern Mexico when a butterfly settled beside me. The color of it was a blue unlike any I had ever seen. There are 9 different words in Maya for the color blue. But in the comprehensive Porrua Spanish Maya dictionary, there are just 3 Spanish translations, leaving 6 butterflies that can be seen only by the Maya, proving beyond doubt that when a language dies, 6 butterflies disappear from the consciousness of the earth. And so here, this is a picture of our ranch in Western South Dakota, where my parents ranch. And again, this idea that landscape literature is very much focused on that relationship with the land. Okay, these stories, this was scholarly personal narrative. I wrote these stories coming from this methodology. And I discovered this and knew this is it. This is what I want to do. It is the blending essentially of academic scholarship and rigor, we would say vigor, along with creativity. I didn't know that such a thing existed. I really, you know, like I knew, okay, when I write in creative writing, I use this voice. When I write in academic writing, I use this voice. Scholarly personal narrative, it falls under the umbrella of narrative inquiry as understood by Cresswell, but it combines scholarship, personal stories, and universalizable themes and insights in a seamless manner. And actually, Tatiana, back to your book, that I have, I would love to talk more about this with you and what you did in your own writing. Okay, and through scholarly personal narrative, you approach research through these steps. Pre-search, how do I get started? Me search, what is my personal narrative? Research, what scholars and researchers have informed my writing. And we search, what are the implications for my profession? And so I hope that as you are each thinking of your own creative and academic journeys, I don't know, scribble down notes. Maybe this might inspire ideas or thoughts for your own journey. What I did before I started writing these stories is I went through, that's my desk. I went through 25 years of personal journals. I'm a big journal writer. And I looked for common themes, and the themes that came out, and then I color coded them. Thank goodness for sticky notes and markers. And so I color coded them, and the themes that emerged were language, landscape, wildness, beauty, and imagination. So I started with that. And then I thought, what's my personal narrative? And we each bring to what I hope to contribute. And we each have a personal narrative. My personal narrative is that I happen to live in a very multilingual, very global academic world. I also very much live in my narrative nonfiction that I adore, very much based in the United States, many of the writers, and this background that comes from regenerative agriculture. That's a unique me that I can bring to all of these fields. I don't know anybody else who has that combination. It could be that there are, and I just don't know them. But I think, you know, with each of your areas, what's your unique you that you bring to it? And this was diving into what was the literature review for the dissertation, but we all do the, you know, literature, other versions of literature reviews in all areas of our work. I loved this. I absolutely, you know, so I was reading deeply and vastly and listening to within linguistic human rights, multilingualism, ecolinguistics, language landscape, all of this, and the ideas of regenerative agriculture. This was one day, my office was completely out one day. Several months, my office was completely out of control. And it was during the pandemic, and our kids were living at home. And I looked at my 23-year-old son, Luke. I said, Luke, please, you got to help me with these books. And we took everything down and we just piled them up. And you can see these say language. There's one for wildness, there's one for beauty, there's one for imagination, and then we put them back up in order. And then again, thank goodness for sticky notes. And I looked at the themes that emerged from my literature review and the themes that emerged from my journals. And therein, those were the kernels of story that would come from this. In the research, what are the implications for what you are studying, what you're writing about, what you're doing for your field? And again, what I hope to do is contribute within the academic field by exploring these ideas through scholarly personal narrative and through wildness, beauty, and imagination. What I hope to contribute to language, to the field of language landscape literatures, is bring what we know from second language acquisition, from ecolinguistics, from human rights, from linguistic human rights into this genre. we'll see. We'll see. We'll see if how lucky I am, if it works. And this is foundational in these stories. And it was a beautiful alignment of the stars that this woman and her ideas came into my life. Liliology, this is Dr. Narida Blair. She goes by Ned, a colleague, a scholar, an Indigenous scholar from Australia. And what she brings, a theoretical framework that embraces ecosystems, natural landscapes, Indigenous languages as vital, integral, and necessary elements for global sustainability. And when it was my dissertation chair, she said, Dawn, we met one time, she said, I got a book for you. She said, it's about liliology. She said, and I have no idea what it is, but I heard liliology and I thought Dawn Wink. And I said, I have no idea what it is either, but let's find out. And it has been such a blessing. It is bringing Indigenous understandings of the complexities and the integrated nature of life, and particularly with these ideas into the academic world, where they have historically been marginalized and silenced. And it is grounded in story. It is grounded in story, and it is iterative rather than linear. It is circular, it is spiral. And I love, she talks about Hokari's description of storing. And yes, that is meant to be storing as a verb, absolutely. Maintaining the knowledge did not mean finding the right story, but widening the possibilities stories. And historically, oftentimes there's been the right story, or the story that had power, and other stories were marginalized or silenced. And I loved, again, our Terry Tempest Williams. It provides the structure to integrate academic research and life stories to express voices often silenced. And since my whole premise is talking about the extinction of languages, it's talking about linguistic imperialism, linguicide. Life stories to express voices often silenced within academic writing, an expression of how justice may rule on the side of deep time and a storied landscape that has been held in place by the roots of indigenous wisdom. One of the reasons, well, the primary reason why when I heard liliology, I thought, I have no idea what it is, but I love it, is, and this comes from Tobe's ideas about mother tongue languages. And, we, well, everywhere in the globe, but I'm thinking also, those of us who work within linguistic environments and live on planet Earth, this idea of mother tongue languages are like a water lily. And so here is a mother tongue language. Lilies, water lilies, have one stalk and one set of roots. And all of the other flowers come from this one stalk and set of roots. And so, for example, say this is a mother tongue language of Spanish. And this, because they don't speak English when they go to school, and they go to a school where they are not given instruction in their primary language. They're told this is the United States, speak English. So all of a sudden, this language, this mother tongue language, is truncated. It's cut off. Well, not only now, this flower, which has no support anymore to its root system, can never really flourish and grow. And neither can this one. The strength of each additional language is dependent upon those roots and the strength of the mother tongue language. So these ideas come from Tove Skutnip-Kangas, and I need to see things visually. And so I grabbed my watercolors and I just started painting. And I needed to visualize liliology. Liliology, Dr. Blair, Ned's thoughts. So again, the water lily is each petal represents, and each texture and the beauty of each petal represents a different story. They represent storing in many different genres, many different flowers, colors, shapes, textures, as genres of knowing. Flowers are not homogeneous. And so this idea, each petal is a story, each equally as beautiful, each embraced. And then Dr. Blair talks about the brick wall of academia and how historically the Western academia has been a brick wall. She's referring primarily to indigenous wisdom, indigenous ways of knowing, indigenous story. And the brick wall, each brick represents a specific discipline. So this is one discipline. This isn't, so here's the discipline of mathematics, here's the discipline of science, here's the discipline of social studies, nursing, and the mortar between, the spaces between are the boundaries between disciplines. And I knew that had been my experience in life, but I didn't have language for it until I saw this. And then at its heart, this, and she refers to the bush potato, of course, coming from Australia, also a sweet potato, represents the center, represents spirit known, the spirit knowings that sustain, energize, and nourish for growth. And then she talks about how a spider web can integrate all. It's not about knocking down the brick wall. It's about integrating multiple voices, multiple ways of knowing, and the spaces in between, that between indigenous knowings and Western knowledge. So what I hope is the stories that I wrote, that I may and will write, may serve as this, as these spider webs. And it's interesting because my mom, who's also an academic, when I first started talking about liliology, she said, honey, she said, my brick wall keeps getting in the way of the nourishing spirit knowings from the sweet potato, because it's what we've been drenched in academia. I'm very mindful of myself as a white woman and cultural appropriation and these ideas that are Dr. Narida Blair's, and within the whole of the inquiry. So my hope is that these stories and this work will serve for restoration, for lifting up the storying of indigenous wisdom, for the wisdom of all languages, and really the wisdom of stories and stories that have been silenced. So I wrote 5 scholarly personal narratives, essays essentially, which are now being sent about for publication. Landscape, Altar of Languages, Early Morning Languages to Light, Running with Orion, Rhythms of Language, Rhythms of Land, Rhythms of Life, and Lenses of Lily. Each of these, here is my process. I'm happy to share for those of you who are very interested in the process. Get in touch with me, because it was very structured. I'm very happy to share all of this with you. I'm going to dive into one of the stories that I wrote, Landscape, Altar of Languages. And I started with a kernel that comes from my real and lived experience, that comes from my real and lived life. This was our Dia de los Muertos altar, which I create every year. And as I was composing it, I thought, if my German Lutheran great-grandparents could only see themselves on this Dia de los Muertos altar, never in their wildest dreams could they have imagined. And then I thought, how that's so like life and our landscape of languages. I look at the Dia de los Muertos altar, the languages, stories, silenced voices, and languages lost, lift from the altar and I shift my eyes outside to the juniper and pinon dotted landscape of northern New Mexico. Let the landscape serve as an altar to many languages, as vast and deep as the endless blue sky above. May we honor the landscape altar of languages, lifting through those silent stories and endangered languages. And this I thought was such the essence of it. So this is a wine glass that was my maternal grandmother's, who died when my mom was a baby. So this is a rare treasure. She grew up in the Black Hills of South Dakota. And beside her are my Virgen de Guadalupe, and this is the patron saint of breast cancer by an artist, Jill Gurule, here in Santa Fe, who passed away. I thought, if my grandma Janet could see this, and then I've got the corn husks behind, and that's it. That's the beauty, is the mosaic, the difference. Languages reflect beauty. Beauty is expressed in the deepest sense through a rich tapestry of the diversity of languages upon the altar of the land. And I'm just going to read briefly from each of these, lifting languages to light. I get up really early in the morning, and I have my coffee and my candles, and I read and I write. This is from my desk. We lift languages to light. Each language reflects a unique and irreplaceable light. With the loss of each language, all dimensions of that light extinguish forever. All of the nuances, reflections, spectrums of color and connection gone. Yet somehow, through writing, through lifting the language to light, perhaps, just perhaps, we might create a spark, an energy that will gain strength and grow. Rhythms of language, rhythms of land, rhythms of life. Language and landscape form central components of these life rhythms. The power of language courses through all. Language can be used to inspire, inform, connect, and heal. Language can also be used as a weapon against the essence of our humanity, used to harm, threaten, diminish, or destroy. We now find Earth's linguistic rhythms in deep disharmony. The rhythmic cadence of the world's languages declines into ever fewer musical notes. The current rate of extinction of languages on a global scale is unprecedented in human history. Oh, and there's me running with my dog, Angus. Running with Orion. It was funny because I realized we were just back from an 11-mile run, and you know, it's very important to combine your dog's chew toy with your running attire. I realized after this photo had been taken. I run in the early morning when it's dark, and the first thing I look for is Orion overhead, and that's where this stems from. Calyx exumanax, calyx cusathax, and this is in Aleut. Unagan greet each other daily by greeting the morning and commenting on how good the morning tastes. I run west and see a ribbon of light gray on the horizon. Calyx humanax, calyx hunatax. I whisper as I run. I know that by the time I arrive home, light gray will wash the sky, and the sun's yellow glow will touch the edges of the distant mountains and lift the land's light to silhouette. In my journal that morning, I had written of the paradigm of dominance reflected in English, along with an awareness of the worlds contained within each indigenous language and the worlds lost with their extinction. Beyond science, I turn to wildness, beauty, and imagination as lenses to inform what is happening now with languages and what can be done to maintain and replenish biolinguistic diversity, how ecolinguistics can be lifted to light. Languages embody wildness. With the loss of each language, so too do we lose a visceral element of life. Let us know and love the land. Let us know and love language. Let us know and love their intimate relationship. If we will defend what we know, let us defend all languages and the land of their origin. And my hope is, with the publication of these stories and the book that I hope will come from it, that these stories will serve as seed bombs. And seed bombs are meant, you put seed within clay or mud and you throw them places where those seeds, it was previously inaccessible. And so I hope that I'm throwing seed bombs into different genres. And I love this quote: storytellers ought not be too tame. They ought to be wild creatures who function adequately in society. They are best in disguise, for if they lose all their wildness, they cannot give us their truest joys. And I'm going to open our gathering now for questions and conversation. I'll stop screen sharing. This was this was in Oaxaca. And this was just a petal of roses that were at the entrance to a restaurant. So, and I hope if you're in a place where you feel comfortable, please turn on your camera so we can all see each other and gather for conversation.
Thank you, Dawn. Please, people who have questions, turn on your microphone and talk to Dawn, talk to us.
Oh, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for coming. Oh, thank you, Emily. Thank you.
Well, I have a question. It's more of a personal question, I guess, in your process. You write very positively and beautifully about so many of these things, but I feel like right next to this is loss and grief. And
yes.
And I'm wondering how you dealt with it. Did you write? Is it part of your writing? Did you write through it, or were you able to set it aside and really keep positive and know that you're making seed bombs and and changing the world that way?
That's a great question. That no, that's in. I think it is the grief and reading stories of grief, of language loss, that most inspires me. And it's the look in kids' eyes, in my students' eyes, describing how they've been made to feel because their mother tongue language is one other than English, or because their parents' mother tongue language is one. No, I very much sink into that, and it's very much woven throughout the whole of the dissertation, but also the narratives. I didn't dip into that. We had such a little window of time, but that's, I think, at least for me, that's what inspires me to continue to do what I do. And I try to stay grounded in, because it can be overwhelming. I mean, it's devastating what's happening and how intimately it's linked to climate change and all, but I think that idea of lifting things to light and that idea of action are what buoy me. And now I know that when I'm deep in the midst of like feeling down about that, I'll pop you a text or I'll call you. Okay, Val.
Yes.
Remember what we talked about? I'm there. And it looks like Tatiana.
Yes. Hi, Dawn. Thank you for.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful to hear you talk about your work, and not only talk about it, but show it, right? And in its visual way, because I think just you talking about it wouldn't have really been as powerful without the images and your art and your photographs. I was kind of struck, and it made so much sense, like how you took so much time to find a doctoral program that worked for you. And I guess that's my question. Like, we live in boxes, like all our fields, all our work, and your work is kind of blowing up those boxes. But how do you move? How do we move in that direction? Because I feel like I try to do that too, to bring things together, but then you have to, like, well, this goes here and this goes there. And so where do you see yourself going, and how do you see like our fields? And I don't even know what that means, like field, right? Because it's like,
yeah. No,
so I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
Express it beautifully. And it's something that I felt internally, but wasn't necessarily comfortable expressing in either in academic or creative writing context until I learned about scholarly personal narrative. And it just kind of was like, oh, we can do both. I hope, we'll see each other at AERA, and I'm going to submit a proposal for the following year for AERA, really looking at these ideas, because what has been fascinating for me, how you never know what is going to resonate with readers and your work. What has really been resonant in my experience is exactly what you just said. And I think people are hungry for breaking out of these disciplines, because it's not how we live life. And, we talk about it in translanguaging, we talk about it in, we don't live that way. And so I hope to do a lot more talking and writing about it, because it seems to really resonate. Yeah.
Good.
Thanks.
I look forward
Yeah.
to it. Thank you.
Yeah.
See you today,
Ray. Yeah. Steve.
Hi, thanks so much for your presentation. I wonder if in liliology, the premise is that we construct the stories, and that in the world there are no stories. There are tools for understanding each other and things.
I will have to, it's interesting. My understanding, and I don't want to speak for Ned, I can ask her. My understanding of liliology is a lifting of the stories of voices that have been silenced. And so I think, are we saying the same thing? Or, I mean, they're the constructed stories, but they're only like within, the academic world, the only stories allowed were historically Western male, frequently quantifiable. And this kind of expands those ways of knowing exponentially. Does that answer your question, Steve?
Well, not directly, but that's certainly
Right.
very true. I mean, we are boxed in, and
Yeah.
oppression through control of stories, you just have to look at media and see.
Yeah.
We remember some warnings about that,
Yeah.
when people are lied to constantly with false stories, they don't believe the stories, they stop believing in anything and give up. I'm just thinking of the way, stories are our temporary constructs, and the silence beneath the storytelling is the constant. I totally changed my idea of my own father in middle age when I found his college grade cards, right? He got a BA in business, coming back from France after World War II on the GI Bill.
Wow.
And, I thought he would have A's in business, math, and accounting and all that. He barely passed those subjects. He had A's in history and English, but he gave up that to support his family.
And this idea that we can bring things together. Thank you, Steve. Let's keep talking about it, because I think I'd love to keep talking about it. And I would love, Matt, was this helpful for you and your journey and your inquiry?
Oh, Dawn, it's always great to hear your process and your thinking about it. I'm working on my doctorate in ministry, which is a practical degree, and stories I think are going to be at the heart of it some ways, and somewhat in the borderlands. One of the themes I might like tackle for the project is the border areas. So some of the images you had, like of the bricks and of the lilies, I really, really appreciate that and love that. I'll probably have to kind of like circle around later. But really, really appreciated this, and thank you for your work.
I'm so grateful you're here, Matt, and we'll connect.
Really
Let's connect next week. Yeah.
It's really been helpful. I think the one thing that interests me from an academic perspective is this idea of placemaking and spaces versus places. And one of the things that I think this could help me with is, placemaking oftentimes involves giving names to things, and here up in Northern California, where we've had 2 genocides of the Pomo people as well as of the Chinese American people, what happens when you're trying to reflect upon a place where there's been genocide, but you don't
Mhm.
have the names of those people even, or you don't have contacts to those communities anymore because they've all been moved away. So how do you do that authentically as settlers, as part of the settler
Right,
tradition?
right. Mhm.
So anyway, looking for words on that one.
Yeah, let's talk more about that. I'm going to think about that. Thank you, Matt. Lenny, if you're still here, I'd love to hear your thoughts coming from a science background. If you're there.
Hi, I am still here.
Hey, Lenny, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think I need to digest it some more before I can really give much thoughtful
Yeah.
comment about it. But I enjoyed seeing your process, and
Mhm.
Southern Arizona, as well as where we are here in northern New Mexico, are places that are very important to me as landscapes. So it was nice to hear about your journey from those, between those landscapes for you.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know we shared Southern Arizona, Lenny. Where are you from? Or where did we talk about this? Where?
I don't think so. I spent several years teaching at Prescott College, and I
Oh my
taught a lot
gosh.
in Southern Arizona. So I spent a lot of time in that landscape with students, thinking about wildness and
Mhm.
nature and
I
natural
bet.
history and all those sorts of things. So
Oh, I'm so grateful to know that. And Matt grew up in Tucson. He's a Southern Arizona guy too.
oh yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
Good.
So
Mm.
I appreciate it. I don't think I have any.
Okay,
Those are
no,
my
I
thoughts.
was
I don't know how deep they are.
yeah, no, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank Lenny, thank you so much for coming too. Thank you.
sure. Yeah, it was really fun. Glad I could make it.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Dawn? This has just been so beautiful, and your description of scholarly personal narrative is great. I haven't ever heard it described so clearly and then demonstrated so clearly. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. I didn't know such a thing existed either. And and Tatiana was asking kind of also where might we go from here. And that idea of scholarly personal narrative has not, I don't think within the academic world has not been, I don't know, embraced or explored, as I just has so much potential. And so I know for me, that's definitely an area that I would love to expand within the academic world, because I just think it holds, story is what connects. It just holds so much potential. So yeah.
All right, well, if there are no other questions or comments right now, thank you all for coming, and thank you, Dawn, so much for presenting this. This has been a wonderful way to spend some time today, and it's just more inspiration for me. So I just really appreciate all you've shared.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Val, for hosting this, and thank you everyone for sharing your incredibly valuable and treasured time. And I love seeing you.
All right, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.